Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The distant roar of dragons shattered the peaceful air over Middle-earth. A chill swept through the villages as the ground trembled beneath the weight of their wings. It had been centuries since dragons openly flew over the land, their presence a distant memory for most. But now, they returned in force, soaring across the sky, leaving nothing but scorched earth and fear in their wake. In the hidden corners of the Shire, Gondor, and Rowan, whispers began to circulate about the nature of this sudden aggression. Farmers spoke of seeing entire flocks of sheep swept away by great talons. Merchants returned from their travels with tales of fire raining down on the countryside. A once forgotten terror was now all too real. Gandalf, ever watchful of the affairs of Middle-earth, knew immediately that something far deeper lay beneath the surface of these attacks. It was not mere coincidence that these creatures, bound by an ancient pact with the peoples of Middle-earth, were suddenly rising en masse. The peace treaty had held firm for centuries, a pact forged in blood and magic that promised peace between the two powerful races. For dragons to suddenly disregard it, there had to be a reason, one that could not be ignored. Sitting by the hearth in the Hall of Fire in Rivendell, Gandalf allowed his thoughts to wander. His gaze shifted beyond the flickering flames, his mind reaching far beyond the comforts of the sanctuary. He had seen visions, felt the currents of magic shifting in the air. A dark force was stirring in the east, something ancient and malevolent. The threads of power binding the dragons to their peaceful existence were unraveling, and he knew only one being could be behind it, the Dragon King. Gandalf stood abruptly, his mind made up. He could not delay any longer. If there was to be any hope of stopping the dragon's onslaught, he would have to go to their sanctum, the very heart of their power, and confront the Dragon King himself. But first, there were preparations to be made, allies to be consulted, and a dangerous journey that lay ahead. The Council of Middle-earth had convened in haste. Leaders from all corners of the land gathered under the banner of urgency, their faces etched with worry and determination. Men, elves, and dwarves alike filled the great stone hall, their voices rising in a mixture of fear and anger. The news of the dragon's rampage had spread quickly, and now each faction debated how best to respond. "We should strike now, while we still have the chance," shouted Boromir, his fists clenched as he paced before the council. "If we wait any longer, the dragons will burn everything we have built to ash." "We cannot hope to defeat them with brute force," Elrond countered, his voice calm but firm. "The dragons are too many, and their power too great. We must consider diplomacy. There are still ancient ties between our peoples and the dragons." "Diplomacy?" Gimli growled from his seat, his voice thick with disdain. "What good is talk when the skies are filled with fire?" Gandalf, standing near the entrance to the hall, cleared his throat, his staff tapping lightly against the stone floor as he approached the center of the room. The assembled leaders fell silent, all eyes turning to him. His presence commanded respect, his wisdom valued above all else in such dire times. "I believe both approaches hold merit," Gandalf began, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "But before we rush to battle or seek parley, we must first understand the true nature of this crisis. The dragons are not attacking at random. They are following the will of their king, the ancient Dragon King who resides deep within their sacred sanctum. Something has changed within him. He seeks to break the pact that has bound dragons and men for centuries." The Dragon King, Aragorn, who had remained silent until now, spoke with a mixture of surprise and concern. "He has been absent from our world for ages. What could have caused his return?" "That is the very question I seek to answer," Gandalf replied, his expression grim. "And I intend to find out. I will journey to the dragon's sanctum myself, to speak with the Dragon King and uncover the truth behind this catastrophe. Only by understanding his motives can we hope to stop this war before it consumes all of Middle-earth." There were murmurs of both agreement and doubt from the council, but none dared to argue with Gandalf's wisdom. After further discussion, it was decided Gandalf would go alone, for his magic and knowledge were the greatest defense against the dragon's might. But even Gandalf knew the journey would be perilous, and the outcome uncertain. The next morning, Gandalf set out from Rivendell, his heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. As he traveled through the lands of Middle-earth, he saw firsthand the destruction left in the wake of the dragons. Fields once lush and green were now charred black, entire villages reduced to smoldering ruins. The few survivors he encountered spoke of the dragons with terror in their eyes, their voices trembling as they recounted the horrors they had witnessed. Despite the devastation, Gandalf pressed on. His path led him through ancient forests, over towering mountain ranges, and across wide plains, each step bringing him closer to the dragon's lair. But as he journeyed deeper into the wilderness, he began to sense a presence following him, a shadow in the periphery of his vision that vanished whenever he turned to face it. One night, as he rested beside a small campfire in the foothills of a towering mountain, Gandalf finally confronted his pursuer. A rustle in the bushes alerted him, and in an instant, he was on his feet, staff raised and ready. But what emerged from the darkness was not a foe but a dragon, a young, sleek creature with shimmering silver scales and eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Gandalf lowered his staff but kept his gaze steady on the dragon. "I sensed you following me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Why do you hide in the shadows?" The dragon, though large by human standards, was clearly young and uncertain. It shifted on its taloned feet, the glow of the fire reflecting off its scales. I meant no harm," the dragon stammered, its voice surprisingly soft. "I am Valeth, a dragon of the Eastern Ridge. I was sent to watch you, to ensure you did not stray too close to the Dragon King's domain." "And yet here you are," Gandalf said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You speak as though you have not yet made up your mind about my presence." Valeth hesitated, its large eyes flickering with indecision. "The Dragon King has commanded us to attack your kind, but I do not wish to fight. There is much we do not understand. The Dragon King says we will reclaim our former glory, but something feels wrong." Gandalf's eyes softened. Here, before him, was the proof he had sought. Not all dragons wished for war. Some, like Valeth, were caught between loyalty to their king and a desire for peace. "Then perhaps you can help me, Valeth," Gandalf said gently. "I seek to understand the Dragon King's true motives." "Will you guide me to him?" Valeth hesitated for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I will take you to him. But he is not the dragon you may remember. His heart has been darkened by a force far older and more dangerous than even the dragons themselves." With Valeth as his guide, Gandalf continued his journey, now moving deeper into the heart of dragon territory. The landscape grew harsher, the air heavy with the scent of sulfur and molten rock. The sky above was constantly shrouded in ash, blocking out the sun and casting the world in a perpetual twilight. It was as though the land itself had been scorched by the dragon's breath. Finally, after days of travel, they arrived at the foot of the Dragon King's sanctum, a colossal mountain fortress carved from the very rock of the earth. Molten rivers of lava flowed from its peaks, creating a natural barrier of fire and heat. The entrance to the sanctum was guarded by two massive stone statues, each depicting a dragon in mid-flight, their eyes glowing with an airy red light. "This is as far as I can take you," Valeth said, stopping at the base of the mountain. "The Dragon King will not allow me to enter. But I will wait here for your return if you return." Gandalf nodded, his expression solemn. "Thank you, Valeth. You have done more than enough. Now, I must face the Dragon King alone." With that, Gandalf began his ascent, his staff glowing faintly in the dim light. The path up the mountain was treacherous, the heat almost unbearable. But Gandalf pressed on. He could feel the weight of ancient magic in the air, the power of the dragons emanating from the very stones beneath his feet. At last, he reached the summit, where the entrance to the Dragon King's throne room loomed before him. The doors were enormous, carved with intricate runes and symbols of power. With a deep breath, Gandalf raised his staff and pushed the doors open, stepping into the heart of the dragon's lair. There, seated upon a throne of molten stone, was the Dragon King. The Dragon King sat in silence, his enormous frame towering over the molten throne. His scales shimmered in hues of black and deep crimson, the very color of volcanic rock, as though the earth itself had forged him. His eyes, glowing like embers, fixed on Gandalf with a penetrating intensity that could incinerate the weak of heart. Yet Gandalf stood firm, his staff in hand, feeling the immense pressure of the dragon's presence but refusing to yield to fear. "So, you have come at last, wizard," the Dragon King rumbled, his voice like the grinding of stone and the roar of distant thunder. Each word reverberated through the chamber, causing the walls to tremble. "I have waited for this moment." Gandalf took a step forward, his eyes locked on the dragon's gaze. "I have come to seek the truth, Dragon King," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "The dragons have broken the ancient pact with the peoples of Middle-earth. Your kind burns our lands, slaughters the innocent. Why? What drives you to this madness?" The Dragon King leaned forward slightly, his great wings unfurling just enough to cast even deeper shadows over the room. "Madness? No, wizard. It is not madness that drives us, but destiny. For too long, we have slumbered beneath the weight of a pact that chains us to your kind. We are dragons, beings of fire and strength. Why should we bow to the will of men, elves, and dwarves? It is time for dragons to rise once more, to claim what is rightfully ours." "There is more to this than simple pride," Gandalf replied, his voice sharpening. "I sense a darkness in your words, Dragon King. Something beyond you is at play here." The Dragon King's eyes narrowed, the glow within them intensifying as he studied Gandalf in silence. A low growl rumbled from his throat, but it was not a sound of anger. "You are perceptive, as always, wizard," he said after a long pause. "There is indeed another power at work. A power that has opened my eyes to the truth of our existence. We were never meant to be subservient to your kind. We were meant to rule." Gandalf's grip on his staff tightened as he felt the darkness swirling in the air around the Dragon King. "What is this power? Who has poisoned your mind with these lies?" A deep, menacing laugh echoed through the chamber as the Dragon King rose from his throne, his massive form casting a shadow over Gandalf. "You already know the answer, wizard. He is no stranger to you, an ancient force long thought defeated. He has returned, and with him, the promise of a new age." Suddenly, the air around Gandalf seemed to grow heavier, as though the weight of the world itself pressed down upon him. And then he felt a presence, dark and cold, lurking just beyond the edges of the room. A voice, soft yet insidious, whispered in his mind. "Sauron," Gandalf whispered, his voice barely audible. The revelation sent a chill down his spine, though he had suspected as much. The Dark Lord, long defeated in the war for the One Ring, had somehow survived, his malevolent spirit lingering in the shadows, seeking new ways to reclaim power. And now, he had turned his attention to the dragons, exploiting their pride and desire for freedom to serve his own ends. "Sauron seeks to use you," Gandalf said, his voice rising with urgency. "He cares nothing for dragons, nor for your glory. He desires only dominion over all creatures, and he will destroy you as easily as he would destroy men." The Dragon King snarled, smoke curling from his nostrils. "Lies!" he bellowed, his voice shaking the chamber. "You fear our strength, wizard. You fear that we will no longer bow to your kind. Sauron has shown me the truth that we are destined to rise above the petty squabbles of men. We are not pawns in his game, but the rightful rulers of this world." Gandalf took another step forward, his eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. "You are blind, Dragon King. You cannot see that Sauron is manipulating you. He has already taken control of your heart and mind, and he will not stop until you are his slave." For a moment, the Dragon King said nothing, his great chest heaving with barely contained rage. Then, with a sudden roar, he unleashed a torrent of flame, the heat of it so intense that it singed the very air around Gandalf. But the wizard was prepared. Raising his staff, he cast a shield of light around himself, deflecting the flames as they licked at the edges of the room, scorching the stone walls. You speak of destiny, but what is destiny without choice? Gandalf's voice rang out over the roar of the flames. Sauron has taken that from you. He has clouded your judgment, twisted your desire for freedom into a weapon for his own use. But it is not too late, Dragon King. You can still break free from his hold. The flames subsided, leaving the room thick with smoke. The Dragon King's eyes glowed fiercely in the dim light, but there was something different now, a flicker of doubt, a hesitation in his movements. He stared down at Gandalf, his breathing ragged, as though some great internal struggle raged within him. A broken bar cannot stop what has already begun, the Dragon King said, though his voice lacked the conviction it once held. The dragons will rise, with or without me. The world will burn. The world will burn only if you allow it, Gandalf countered. You are their king. They follow your will. If you choose to defy Sauron, to uphold the ancient pact, the dragons will listen. You can prevent the destruction of Middle-earth, but only if you choose to. There was a long silence as the Dragon King stood motionless, his great head bowed slightly as if weighed down by an unbearable burden. For what felt like an eternity, he said nothing, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a blade. And then, slowly, he raised his head, his eyes locking with Gandalf's once more. A broken bar was wrong, the Dragon King murmured, the words heavy with regret. I thought I could control him, that I could use his power for the good of my people. But I see now that he has been using me all along. Sauron is a master of deceit, and a broken bar have been a fool. Gandalf stepped forward, his expression softening. It is not too late. You have the strength to resist him, but you must act now. The dragons must be called back. If they continue on this path, there will be nothing left of Middle-earth to rule. The Dragon King let out a deep, mournful sigh, the sound resonating through the chamber. I will call them back, he said, his voice filled with determination. But Sauron will not relinquish his hold so easily. He will strike again, and when he does, I may not be able to resist him. Then we must act quickly, Gandalf replied. We will need the strength of the dragons, united with the peoples of Middle-earth, to stand against him. Together, we can break his power once and for all. With a solemn nod, the Dragon King rose to his full height, his wings stretching wide as he prepared to summon his kin. He let out a deafening roar, a call that echoed through the mountains and across the skies, reaching the ears of every dragon in Middle-earth. Slowly but surely, the dragons began to retreat, their flames extinguished as they returned to their sanctum, called home by their king. But even as the dragons withdrew, Gandalf knew the battle was far from over. Sauron would not sit idly by while his plans unraveled. He would strike again, and when he did, it would take the combined might of all the free peoples and the dragons to stop him. As the last of the dragons returned to the sanctum, Gandalf turned to the Dragon King, his expression grim. There is still much to be done. Sauron's influence has not been fully broken, and his forces will gather strength. But you have taken the first step toward redemption. Now, we must prepare for the final battle. The Dragon King nodded slowly, his eyes burning with a renewed sense of purpose. I will stand with you, wizard. For too long, I have allowed pride and fear to cloud my judgment. But no more. Sauron will not claim the dragons, nor will he claim Middle-earth. Together, we will ensure that his darkness is banished forever. And so, the pact between dragons and men was restored, not through force or fear, but through understanding and unity. The flames that had once threatened to consume the world were extinguished, and a new alliance was forged in the heart of the Dragon King's lair, an alliance that would shape the fate of Middle-earth for generations to come.